Good? Great. Good morning. A few weeks ago, I joined 6 attorneys general, including Mike DeWine of Ohio and Herb Slattery, along with attorneys representing cities and counties at a special conference to talk about the hundreds of opioid manufacturer and distributor lawsuits across this country. I spent the day listening to each state talk about the impact the flood of opioid prescriptions has had on their people and on their economy. I spoke about how Kentuckians have suffered, perhaps the most. I spoke about how drugs are killing our people. Kentucky lost 1,404 of our family members, friends, and neighbors to fatal overdoses last year. On average, 4 Kentuckians die from this epidemic every single day. I spoke about how drugs are tearing apart our families, how we have more children in foster care and kinship care than ever in the history of our Commonwealth. And I spoke about how drugs are decimating our workforce, that our single greatest challenge in job growth is this addiction epidemic. And finally, I spoke about how 50 Kentucky counties have been identified by the CDC as being at risk for an outbreak of HIV and hepatitis C solely because of this opioid epidemic. I was joined at that national conference by the AGs of Ohio, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, and Virginia. Those are different states, different people, different parties. But we are all united. We are united in our commitment to holding these companies accountable for the devastation that they have caused. And we sat and we listened to these companies try to explain their actions away, to try to run from basic math. But that basic math is irrefutable. They tried to explain how they could send millions of pills to counties with 30,000 people and claim everything is okay while they counted their billions of dollars in profits. In a word, it made me furious. For my first day as Attorney General, I promised that we would hold these multinational drug companies accountable for the devastation that they've caused. I am fully committed, and I'm keeping my word. Last year, we announced that we were filing suit against Endo Pharmaceuticals for Opana and Opana ER, 2 incredibly dangerous opioids that they manufacture. A month ago, we filed suit against McKesson Corporation for their unfair, misleading, and deceptive business practices that allowed for grossly excessive amounts of opioids to flood small communities, and for failing to report the high volume of these drugs to the federal authorities. Today, we are filing another lawsuit, this time against Ohio-based Cardinal Health over unfair, misleading, and deceptive business practices, and for excessively distributing these dangerous opioids, particularly to rural counties in eastern Kentucky, and failing to report these highly suspicious orders in volume and in location to the DEA and other federal authorities. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? It should. These companies were following a playbook. The playbook gave them record profits and left us with devastation. Combined, AmerisourceBergen, McKesson, and Cardinal Health, who are suing today, distribute up to 85% of the nation's drugs. They are in a unique place to know just how bad it was, and they knew it at the time that it was happening. According to Cardinal Health's second quarter results for fiscal year 2018, which just closed, they reported revenue just for their pharmaceutical segment of $31.1 billion. Folks, that's just in one quarter. Federal and state law requires pharmaceutical distributors to monitor and report to law enforcement when it ships large or suspicious amounts of opioids to a state or region. But Cardinal didn't do that. In fact, Cardinal admitted to failing to heed warnings by the DEA in the past. In 2016, the company reached a $44 million nationwide settlement for, quote, failure to detect and report suspicious orders of controlled substances. Last year, Cardinal boasted a 20.7% market share, the third highest in the country. From February 1st, 2016 to January 31st, 2017, Kentucky pharmacies filled 307.2 million doses of opioids. That is 69 opioid doses or pills for every man, woman, and child in this state. Market analysis tells us 20.7% of those pills came through Cardinal. That would mean from January 1st, 2010 to December 31st, 2016, Cardinal distributed nearly 1.2 million doses of prescription opioids in Jefferson County alone. And from 2012 to 2016, there were 1,057 fatal overdose deaths in Jefferson County alone. Cardinal also carelessly flooded other Kentucky counties with high volumes of prescriptions, especially in eastern Kentucky. In Floyd County, the market share would tell us that Cardinal Health distributed more than 11.6 million opioid pills, or 302 pills for every man, woman, and child. And this is on top of what we previously reported that McKesson provided, over 18 million. That means in just Floyd County, between these two actors, we've got 29 million opioids in Floyd County alone. In Clay County, Cardinal distributed more than 5.2 million doses, 245 pills for every man, woman, and child. In Bell County, they distributed more than 6.2 million doses, or 222 pills for every man, woman, and child in Bell County. Any responsible company would have seen these numbers, immediately reported to the DEA, and said something's wrong. Any healthcare company that is truly focused on the health of our people would have stopped those orders, reported to the DEA, and said something is terribly wrong. But Cardinal was just worried about its bottom line and the billions that it was making. From 2012 to 2016, more than 1,250 Kentuckians died from opioid overdoses in just the 4 counties we listed. Statewide for that time frame, Kentucky experienced more than 5,800 fatalities. Again, those are our friends, our family members, our neighbors. There's some Kentucky family's child or parent that is never coming back. 3 attorneys general have previously filed lawsuits against Cardinal. West Virginia Attorney General Patrick Morrisey's office settled a lawsuit against Cardinal for $20 million. And attorneys general in New Mexico and Delaware currently have suits against Cardinal. Today's lawsuit is filed in Jefferson Circuit Court. I'm intentionally filing these lawsuits in Kentucky State Court because I have made the commitment that we are going to haul these opioid manufacturers and distributors to a Kentucky State Court, so they have to look at our families, our Kentucky families that have suffered this devastation, and they have to explain their actions to those families. The authority to hold these companies accountable lies squarely with the Attorney General's office. It is my duty to protect Kentucky families, whether that's through a criminal investigation or what we have here, these lawsuits. It is my duty to pursue justice, and I'm going to do everything in my power to hold these companies accountable and to secure that justice for our families who have lost so much. And I will do everything I can to hold responsible the companies that put profits over the lives of our people and whose actions resulted in devastation that it'll take our communities maybe a decade to climb out of. We have lost so much. Our families have lost so much. Our communities have lost so much. Our children have lost so much. But a better future is possible. These companies have made billions, and they need to be a part of that better future. They have a duty to fully fund treatment, prevention, and enforcement, to use some of those profits that they earn to help us climb out of this epidemic. Cardinal reports over $100 billion in revenue a year. It's time they started to put real dollars towards finding a solution to this epidemic. I'll take any questions.
You talk about companies that are making $100 billion a year. Yet when they settle, they're only paying out like 20 million, pennies, less than pennies on the dollar. How can you increase that? How can you make that a better outcome than that?
There's no amount of money that's ever going to bring someone's child back that they've lost. For Emily Walden, who lost her son TJ to Opana, there's no amount that's ever going to bring TJ back. But what we have to look for in these lawsuits is what is the value of a dollar today and what can we do with it? If we, for instance, pass the Addiction Recovery, Prevention, and Enforcement Fund, we can ensure that every single dollar that flows in from these lawsuits goes to addressing the epidemic and not some other crisis of the day. We've seen with the $8.5 million we were able to provide from this office to groups like Independent House in Louisville or Chrysalis in Lexington what just a little bit of seed money can do. They can expand their operations. They can serve more people. So in the end, if and when there is any settlement offer, we'll have to look at both how large it is compared to the conduct, because it should be large compared to this conduct. But we'll also have to look at what can we do with dollars today to help people today, to stop the epidemic from getting any worse. Because I'm fully cognizant that a settlement 8 or 10 years from now, if we don't have the dollars in the interim to address the crisis, that we could be facing an even larger, more dire situation than we do right now.
To be specific, what do you want from Cardinal? Are you looking at a set dollar amount and you're saying, I don't want anything less than this?
Well, we are very early. We're just filing the lawsuit today, and we will engage in discovery, which will give us an even better idea than we have right now about their culpability. And we'll base any ultimate resolution on that. There are also national talks going on that Kentucky has been a part of, and we'll have to follow those and to see what the ultimate offers, if any, are there. I'm going to make sure that Kentucky is in the driver's seat, whether nationally or here, to recover significant funds. We don't have half the treatment in this Commonwealth that we need. We don't have half of the prevention and recovery efforts that we need, and these companies have a duty to help fund those needs.
So any settlement would not go into the state's general fund?
Currently it would. So we, along with a number of representatives in the House on both the Democratic and now the Republican side, have put forth bills that would create a specific fund that these dollars would flow into. Now, the fund's important for two reasons. Number one, it assures that the dollars that flow back are used to treat the addiction epidemic. Bruce, as you know, there's a crisis and a financial crisis in Frankfurt every budget cycle. But this is blood money. And money that comes from these companies has to go back and should be restricted by law, mandating that it goes to fight this epidemic. The other thing that bill does, in both the form filed by Democrats and Republicans, is it solves the timing aspect. You know, right now, if the legislature left in the middle of April and we brought in a settlement in May, it might have to wait 2 years to ultimately be appropriated and go where it's needed. This bill would delegate the authority within specific parameters set by the legislature to get that money out to people who can use it on the enforcement, prevention, treatment, or recovery front.
Do you know what the bill number is off the top of your head?
I'll have to look that up. There are two versions. One was filed by Dennis Keene, and the other was filed by Scott Wells. And I'm supportive of both of those bills.
Have they gotten hearings?
No, not yet.
When you do these lawsuits, and you've done them in the past, in Opana, do you ever think about the doctor? Because you can't get the pills without the doctor's prescription, so it seems to me you're going after the big fish, but what about the fish in the middle?
Oh, we're going after both. This office, for the last decade, has pursued doctors for overprescribing through our Medicaid fraud unit and other areas. And we have held a significant number of them accountable, not just through the Kentucky Board of Medical Licensure where they lose a license, but there are a lot of former pill mill doctors that are sitting in jail, whether it's federal or state, right now, and we will continue those efforts. Any doctor, any clinic that would put their profits over the lives of their patients and their true medical needs has to be held accountable. And we've recently even had a law enforcement operation at rogue Suboxone clinics. And we recently filed at least a civil action to hold them accountable.
Will your office be handling this case, or are you going to be using outside counsel?
This is part of the series of cases where we're assisted by outside counsel. I mean, when you take on one of, this would be the, 20 largest companies in America, or pretty close, when you look at $31 billion in revenue in a quarter, we need to make sure that we have the resources. By using outside counsel, it also means that no taxpayer dollars will go to paying the costs of this litigation. It's fully borne by outside counsel, and those costs are extreme. When you look at millions of dollars, millions of documents that will be produced, and the IT infrastructure that's required to house and search those documents, that outside counsel is necessary, especially from a cost standpoint.
So that's the same outside legal team that's handling the other two cases?
Yes.
Okay. So the contract's already.
Yes. Anybody else?
Well, have you coordinated any of this with the governor's office? I know you guys are sending letters back and forth a week or two ago, or sent them notice.
Yeah. We have not on this one. What's going on back and forth? I think anybody who's been watching can see that the governor's recent comments are smoke and mirrors. You know, the governor used his finance cabinet to try to cancel our contract twice with nothing else in place. He then used a legislative committee to try to cancel it a third time. You all then sat through his end-of-the-year press conference where he said he could never, ever work with me, and then threw out a number of insults. Still, we were the first to send him a letter saying, this is the Attorney General's job. Suing drug companies over the opioid epidemic is the Attorney General's job, but we will consider any damages you think your cabinets have, any thoughts on the order that we go, any causes of action that you think that we ought to bring. We'll consider those, and we'll bring them as long as they're valid within the law. And the response that we got was typical, that we're going to cancel your contract, we're going to go out and get outside attorneys, and we want veto power over your decisions as AG in suing drug companies, and we can't do that. This is my job, and we're going to move forward with it.
This is a question for Miranda Combs. You know how she's
Yes.
always on top of this drug issue.
Yes.
She has a question of, I don't know how familiar you are with this. This drug called Crantum. It's supposed to help people get off of, I guess, the pills.
Okay.
But it's got some side effects with hallucinogenics, and the FDA is kind of holding off on it. Do you know anything about it and how it can help people?
I don't have any specific details on that. What I will say is medically assisted treatment, which whether that's Suboxone or sometimes methadone or other options, is an important type of treatment that works for the right patient. But what we're seeing in Kentucky are too many facilities that don't actually give the counseling that has to go along with it, that don't truly treat the person, and that simply trade a prescription for cash. And so we've got to make sure that in Kentucky, we don't just have the facilities to provide all forms of treatment, and we need it, but that they're actually doing it right. Because it's tragic when somebody would go in, instead of just looking for a prescription, looking for actual treatment, and not get it because profits are driving those clinics.
I have an unrelated question.
Sure.
I want to get your thoughts on the fact that we had about half a dozen school districts in Kentucky over the weekend make threats of a school shooting.
Right.